Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing our mini-series on the afterlife, looking at the ritual dilemma for inclusivist religions. Now, broadly, one can categorize views about the afterlife into three categories: exclusivism, inclusivism, and pluralism. Check out earlier videos in this series for definitions of those views, as well as some objections to exclusivism and pluralism. Inclusivists claim that you get into the good place, whether that's heaven, utopia, what have you. In order to do that, you must be a good person by the standards of their religion, but do not need to believe in that religion. Check out earlier videos in the Afterlife playlist for more information. There are several arguments that the exclusivist might raise against the inclusivist. Most religious texts explicitly require both action and belief. According to the exclusivist, inclusivists are simply, quote-unquote, picking and choosing, and therefore not truly justified by their religion in the claims that they make. And for many exclusivists, you need to be justified by your religion in order to make those claims, and nowhere else can provide any amount of justification or truth. This argument is powerful, but since it's dependent on the particular features of a religion, we're not going to cover it more here. The argument presented here makes the case that either inclusivism is the functional equivalent of exclusivism and vulnerable to arguments like the discrimination argument, or the inclusivist is committed to the claim that rituals of religion are pointless, further opening them up to critiques from exclusivists. So this is definitely a weaker argument than the ones we've put forth against exclusivists and pluralists, in part because the exclusivists themselves are much better positioned than the skeptic to take on the inclusivists. But I do still think there's a challenge that we can raise here that will really push on this inclusivist ideology. So first, to help frame the discussion, we can think of the requirements of religion as divided into three categories. Beliefs: you must believe that X deity exists. Rituals: for example, you must pray facing towards Mecca 5 times a day. And moral actions: for example, you must not kill. The distinction between the last two claims is going to be the undoing of the inclusivist. So, let's take a look at three statements. Inclusivists must either require rituals of their religion to get into the good place, or not. If inclusivists require rituals, they're effectively exclusivists. If they do not require rituals, then no one should engage in those rituals, and there's no justification for even the inclusivists themselves really engaging in those rituals. And therefore, their religion should look very different. Either way, generally, most religious people can't fit as inclusivists, because either they need to look more like exclusivists, or they should abandon their rituals of the religion. So, let's take a look at statement 1. Inclusivists must either require rituals of their religion to get into the good place or not. So, inclusivists make a distinction between belief and action required by a religion. Of our original categories, it's clear that beliefs fit under the first category, and morality fits under the latter. However, for most religions, rituals are an essential part of the practice of religion. Yet it's not clear that an inclusivist would require them to access the good place. So it's unclear which side of this the inclusivist would fall on. The problem is, no matter which side they fall on, they're going to have a problem. And so it makes sense that they wouldn't expressly choose. So statement 2. If inclusivists require rituals, they're effectively exclusivists. So, the promise of exclusivism is that, or the promise of inclusivism, rather, is as long as you are a good person, you will get into paradise no matter what you believe. However, if by being a good person they mean going to church every Sunday or making a pilgrimage to Mecca, then it's clear that only members of their religion will actually qualify. They may absolve you of believing, but if you don't appear in every way to be a member of that religion, then you're damned. For all practical intents and purposes, this makes them exclusivists, because there are very few Muslims who go to church every Sunday and got baptized, and there's very few Christians who pray 5 times a day facing Mecca and make a pilgrimage there at some point in their lives. And statement 3. If they do not require rituals, then no one should engage in those rituals. If, on the other hand, there's no moral duty to not work on the Sabbath or take communion, then there's no justification for anyone doing it. While the inclusivist might defend belief in their religion, even if it's not required, because those beliefs are true and it's good to believe things that are true, there's nothing to defend the following of rituals if they're not required for salvation. Most religions ask certain rituals of their adherents, and any inclusivist that denies these rituals opens themselves up to a range of critiques. The point here is that if you say that you have to follow certain rules but not others, the rules that you don't have to follow, you no longer have any justification for. Because, your deity didn't think those rules were important enough for you to get in the afterlife, so they don't really matter. If a non-adherent doesn't have to follow them to get into the good place, you don't have to follow them either. So there are a number of responses that the inclusivist might offer. First, they might bite the bullet and simply deny that there are any rituals in their religion. This may work for weaker religions like deism. But for Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, etc., rituals are an explicit part of achieving a good afterlife. So in this response, the inclusivist might say simply that, all right, rituals aren't important. You have to act morally and follow these moral precepts, and as long as you do that, you get into the good place. You don't have to pray, you don't have to go to church. You can do that if you want to because you want to, but that has nothing to do with you getting to the good place. The only thing that matters is that you act morally. Rituals, you can set on the wayside. A lot of religions will disagree with this in terms of their text, and this will open up the inclusivist to a lot more critiques from the exclusivist. Additionally, the inclusivist might, quote-unquote, bite the bullet in the other direction, claiming that they do require rituals, and going to church on Sunday is just as important as not killing people. While they do not discriminate solely on the basis of belief, discriminating based on which holidays you celebrate seems just as morally problematic as anything the exclusivist claims, opening themselves up to the discrimination argument that we covered earlier in the series. Now, barring these two kind of responses of taking either horn of the dilemma, the inclusivist might instead argue that there are non-ethical reasons for performing rituals. For example, they keep people in the religion. Or they might claim that morality is divorced from getting into a good afterlife. In other words, there are things you should and should not do that have no bearing on what afterlife you get into. The non-ethical reasons seem problematic, since there seems to be an ethical justification hiding just below the surface. And the reason you want to keep people in the religion is so that they follow a set of ethical rules that will get them salvation. Therefore, not following these rituals is limiting those who follow those rules and therefore immoral, leading us back to the first response, requiring rituals. The second claim that morality is divorced from the afterlife also seems problematic. If we have two kinds of good things you can do, why do some count and others do not? If those morally divorced rituals are really good in themselves, what is the justification for that good? How can the inclusivist rationally divide commandments into requirements and suggestions, particularly given that most religious texts list them all as explicit requirements? Why should giving to charity be something that's required to getting into the good place, but praying 5 times a day not be? What do you think? Is there a version of real inclusivism that actually meshes with the teachings of a major religion? Or are they all really just deists or exclusivists in disguise? Leave your answers in the comments below. Subscribe if you want more videos like this, and hit the notification bell so you know when we put videos out. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.